today we're going to learn about percent proportions. All right, so your objective is to use proportions for percent problems, and this is page 34. All right, now, first of all, don't forget that percents are always out of 100, and so you're going to use the number 100 in your proportion. So you're always going to have a percent over 100, so I know automatically that 100 is going to go as my denominator on one side of the proportion, and the percent goes above it. Now, this case, I don't have the percent, so that's how I know the missing number goes over the 100. And here I have is and of. This is giving me a part, and this is giving me a total. And so I'm always going to do part over whole, or in this case, 12 over 50. So again, this is a little kind of trick to help you set up your proportion. Is over of equals percent over 100. Or is the part over of, because it says out of something that's telling you the total. And then the percent will always go over 100. Okay, so if I wanted to solve this, I could always use bat and ball, or I could look for a relationship. And in this case, I can see from here to here that this is just times 2. So I could just do times 2 here, 12 times 2. That's going to equal 24%. So 12 is 24% of 50. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing. Now I have the percentage and I'm looking for the of out of what? So in other words, I'm looking for the total or the whole. So let's start by setting up the proportion. Is over of. Well, 22.5 is, so 22.5 goes here. I don't know what it's out of, so I know this is my x. I'm given the percentage, so 15 goes here, and percents are always out of 100. So that goes there. So now again, I can look for a relationship top to bottom or side to side, but if I don't see one, I know bat and ball will work. So I'm going to do bat and ball. So start off by doing 22.5 times 100. Again, you can use your moving decimal trick to help you with multiplying by 100, or just multiply it like normal. So 0, 0, 0, placeholder, 0, 0, 0, 2 placeholders, 5, 2, 2. 2, 2, 5, 0, 0, and you have one spot, so one spot. That would be 2,250. And then I can't forget, because that's just multiplying. So now don't forget that that answer itself seems really large. Well, that's because you haven't done the last step, which is to divide by the ball. So let's do that. 2,250 divided by 15. That goes in once. 12 minus 5 is 7, so bring that down. 15 goes into 75. Well, let's think. 15, 30, 45, 60, 75. So that would be 5 times. And then you have a 0, so that would be 0. So 150. Now, I can make sure that this makes sense by looking at the relationships. So if I look from here to here, 22.5 is a little bit bigger than 15. So I know x should be a little bigger than 100. And this makes sense because 150 is a little bigger than 100. If I had stopped and said this was my answer, that would be way bigger, so it wouldn't make sense. Okay, let's try another one. See if you can use this trick right here to set it up by yourself. Okay, is over of, or part over whole. Now, yes, it doesn't mean the whole is always going to be the bigger number, so be careful of that. And then what percent means I don't know the percent, and percents are always out of 100. So there's my proportion. Now let's use bat and ball to solve it. Go ahead and try it on your own first, and then we'll go over it. All right, so 100 times 35 Again, I know I could just add 2 zeros and it's going to be 3,500. But again, you can always work it out here to be careful. So 0, 0, 3, that's 3, 5, 0, 0, 3,500. And then now I'm going to divide by the ball. 3,500 divided by 20. That goes in once. 5, 1. 20 goes into 150. Well, let's see, 5, 6, 7 times, which would be 140. And 20 goes into 105 times. So 175 should be your answer. Let's make sure that it's reasonable. 35 is larger than 20, so this should be larger than 100, and it is. And if I go side to side, it's got bigger. Yes, it definitely got bigger. So that makes sense. 35 is getting close to doubling 20, and 175 is getting close to doubling 100. So I know that my answer is reasonable. All right, guys, set this up and solve it on your own. Pause the video. All right, let's see how you did. Setting up the proportion is what is. So I don't know the is. So there's my x. Of is 5.5. The percent is 120% out of 100. Okay, now before I even start this, I noticed that my percentage was over 100%. If my percentage is more than 100%, that means I can already see that this is larger than 100. I know x should be larger than 5.5. Now, 120 is not a lot bigger than 100, so it shouldn't be a lot bigger than 5.5. All right, so let's go ahead and use bat and ball and solve this. All right, so 120 times 5.5, 0, 10, 6, put your 0 placeholder, 0, 10, 6, 0, 0, 6, 6. I have a decimal spot, so that's 660. Now I have to do the second step, which is to divide by 100. That goes in 6 times, which is 600. Add a decimal and a 0, and that goes in 6 times. So that means my answer would be 6.6. Now, is that reasonable? Yes, because again, it's a little bit larger than 5.5, just like 120 is a little larger than 100. All right, so not too difficult when it's actually given to us in this sentence form, because we can use this to help us. Now let's look at it in a word problem format so we can make sure we know how to set this up. Just remember, is over of is just standing for part over whole. So if you can identify a part and a total given to you in a problem, then that'll help you set up your proportion as well. So let's look. Raul budgeted $60 on Dia de los Muertos souvenirs for his Mexico vacation. If souvenirs were 12.5% of his budget, what is the total budget for his trip? Okay, well, first of all, I know I'm given a percent, so if I'm given 3 things, well, technically, because I know a percent's out of 100, so that's 3 numbers I know, and I'm missing 1. So I know I can make a proportion. Now, also, I realize that the question is asking for the total budget. If $60 is just what he spent on souvenirs, could my total budget be smaller? No, the total budget has to be bigger. So I often see students see a percent and see a number, and they just think percent of a number, and they change the percent to a decimal and multiply. I can only use percent of a number like that when I'm given the total, not when I'm looking for the total. So this is when a proportion would help me to solve this problem. Okay, so let's set up the proportion first. Well, what are the 2 units here? Well, remember, we're dealing with percent, so I'm given a percent, so let's start with that. 12.5 is my percent, and I know all percents are out of 100. All right, so now I know on the other side is part over whole. Let's circle that because that's important. Okay, so now the other number I was given was 60. Is 60 a part or is it a total? Well, since it's just what I spent on souvenirs, or Raul spent, then it's just a part. So 60 is the part, and I'm looking for the total because it asks me for the total in the question. What is the total amount of money? So now here's my proportion, and I can use bat and ball to solve it. 12.5% is a lot smaller than 100, so I know that this has gotten a lot bigger to get to 100, so it should be a lot bigger than 60. Okay, so let's see. So first we multiply 160, 006, and we get 6,000. Then I have to do the ball, so I'm going to divide by 12.5. Now, I have a decimal in my divisor and I can't do that, so I need to move it once. And since this is a whole number, the decimal would be at the end, so I move that once, so I add another 0 here. So really, this is now 125, and this is now 60,000. So I'm going to rewrite that so that I divide a little more carefully. Okay, 125 does not go into 6 or 60, but it will go into 600. So I need to think about how many times, and I'm going to list some multiples of 125 just to make my life easier. So 125, next would be 250, 375, then if I add 25, that'd be 4, and then another, so that'd be 500, and then 625. Okay, I've passed 600, so I'm gonna stop there. Okay, so I know that this will go in 1, 2, 3, 4 times, which is 500. Bring down a 0, now into 1,000. Well, let's use this. If it goes 4 times and gets 500, then how many for 1,000? I could just double it. So that means it must be 8 times. And then I have one more 0, so that's just going to be a 0 at the end. So 480. So then my answer is my total budget would be $480 for the trip. All right, let's look at one more problem. 12 out of 20 classmates have scary costumes for Halloween. What percent of classmates have scary costumes? What percent do not have scary costumes? Well, if I find one percentage, like the percent for scary, I know I can always subtract from 100 and find the other part, but I could also make a proportion for each one. And in this case, I could use part total to help me. So part total. If 20 classmates is the total people in the class, that'd be 20. I know 12 of them are for the scary. So if I subtract these, 20 minus 12, that gives me 8. So that means 8 are not scary. So I can always use these when I'm making my proportion. Okay, and this time it's asking me for what percent. So that means I don't know the percent, but I can still use a percent proportion, okay? I could also do part over whole here, 12 out of 20, and just make a fraction and see what that is as a percent, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the proportion. I'm looking for a percent, so there's my X, and I know percents are out of 100, so there's that side. And then the other side is part over whole. Well, since I'm gonna start by finding the scary, it already told me 12 are scary out of 20. So there's my proportion. Now, bat and ball. So 12 times 100. 0, 0, 2, placeholder, 0, 0, 1, 1,200, and then divide by 20. That goes in 0 times, and that would go in 6 times. And then bring down the 0, so that'd be 60. So I now know that X equals 60, so 60% would be scary. Now, it also asked me for what percent is not scary. So, well, if the total is 100%, I could just do 100 minus 60, and that would give me 40% left over. So I know 40% is not scary. But I could also do this. Here's the 8 are not scary, so I could also do 8 as my part out of 20 total equals what percent out of 100. I could use this, do bat and ball, that's 800 divided by 20, and that would also give you 40%. Not scary. Okay, so that is just a little bit about using proportions with percent problems. Proportions are your friend. You can use them for a lot of things. So keep practicing, and I'll see you next time.